couple weeks back, I posted a video called the 11 worst rot areas in your home. And I really think every homeowner should watch it because it teaches you the areas of your house that you should frequently be checking for signs of water rot. But I mentioned in that video that I would soon be talking about the worst rot situation I've ever seen. That's what this video is for. Carpenters love sharing these grisly stories about the terrible things we found in houses. It's kind of our water cooler talk. But this situation I ran into several years ago was so bad and so unexpected, I've always wanted to share it on my channel because I thought it might help people avoid a similar problem. So this video is sort of a cautionary tale about what can happen when bad materials, bad planning, and even just a little bit of bad luck winds up causing major damages to your home. That's coming up next on the Honest Carpenter Show. I originally got called into this house to remodel a screen back porch. This thing was an eyesore with all sorts of rot problems. It had these lower half panels, which I've never liked because they just harbor moisture, they obscure your view of the yard, and I think they just don't look good. So I was happy to gut this thing, reframe it, rescreen it, retrim it, and just get it up to a higher standard. That project took about 4 days total, and I thought it came out looking really great. I was happy, the client was happy with the final product, and I was confident that this work would last a long time. But as frequently occurs in a remodeling situation, I noticed something else when I was back there doing the work. The client had cut back some bushes near the back of the garage. I was working right next to the area and I saw right away that he had a siding rot situation on his hands. The pictures are a little blurry, but just look at the bloated, puffy texture on the lower siding here and this vertical trim board. This is masonite siding and trim, which is really just glorified cardboard. I'm going to do more videos on masonite siding in the future. It's a notorious product and it got put on so many houses in the 80s and 90s, and eventually every one of those houses is going to suffer from lower siding failure. What happens is that when it rains, water cascades off the roof. It hits the ground with force, splashes up against the wall, and masonite siding just sucks it up like a sponge. This is compounded by the fact that there's no gutter here to carry water away from this area and flush it out to safer parts of the yard. In these situations, you really have to replace at least the lower courses with hardy plank siding, which doesn't rot and is much harder to saturate. So I told the client we should tackle that situation here, and it would also let me take a look to be sure that water hadn't been sucked back into the house framing. I'll admit that at this point, I wasn't totally aware of what I was going to find here. That's how water damage goes. You don't know until you open up the wall. So we booked a different day. I showed up and pulled off the lower 3 courses of siding, and bam, right away I knew that we were in trouble. The first thing that worried me was that the original builders had used fiberboard sheathing, a product eerily similar to masonite. Most carpenters call it chipboard, and when I was growing up, we called it something that I can't really say on this channel. But take my word for it. It's cheap, not terribly durable, and the stuff just wicks up water like a sponge. I also instantly noticed telltale signs of termite damage. Just look at the fibrous nature of the wood, the carved pathways in the chipboard. Those are obvious signs. It didn't look like termites were actively living in the home. They'd been exterminated at some point, but not before they'd done a crazy amount of damage. See, most termites need water, wood, and a bit of warmth to thrive. Here, they had all those things, and it was all because unguttered water had been allowed to splash up off the ground, soak through 2 layers of building materials, and sit in there for a really long time. By that point, I was suddenly concerned about the structural integrity of the garage itself. Termites had come up through the corner post, most likely through a crack in the foundation. And from there, over a series of years, they had spread out to about 60% of all the framing in the back of the garage. Most concerning was that they had completely eaten away the bottom plate of both walls. This is the flat 2x4 or 2x6 that all of your studs sit on. These plates were so mushy, I could just push my finger through them. That's the lowest thing that's holding up your roof, and it's almost gone. Not to mention that a large portion of the studs themselves had been eaten away and the corner post was totally annihilated. This is the type of situation where I thought a substantial snow load, something we get maybe every 5 years in North Carolina, might have actually been enough to crush or cave in that corner of the garage. Total nightmare. And I sort of couldn't believe what I was seeing because despite all of the rot I'd tackled over the years, I didn't see termite damage all that often and it tended to be localized. This was sprawling. A new game plan had to be drawn. This part of the house had to be reframed while still standing. And because I felt so bad for the client, I was determined to do it in a way that minimized financial impact. I'll keep the repair phase short, but the first thing I did was shore up the interior room with post jacks like these. I seriously feared something could collapse if I started poking and prodding things. That took the roof weight off, so I began a surgical removal of rotted portions of framing. What made this really difficult is that I was determined to leave the drywall in place. I didn't want the house being wide open, The drywall wasn't terribly damaged, and it would just be one less thing the client would have to pay for afterwards. And this actually worked. I sawzalled out some members, others I just twisted out, prying the drywall screws through the back. I pulled and cut out the entire bottom plates for both sides, and then cut the lower 8 inches off of every stud at the back. I put new treated plates in, and filled in the rest of the space with two 2x6s doubled up and turned on edge, like a header. It worked surprisingly well. Windows got reframed, and of course, electrical got pulled out and rewired after framing was done. And to describe just how bad things had gotten, I pulled this corner post out with my bare hand. No tool whatsoever. It was like hay. I just grabbed it and pulled it out in strings until there was nothing left, all the way up. It was totally ridiculous. After the tricky reframing, things were relatively normal. I put insulation back in, resheathed with OSB this time, and then I went with a 15-weight tar paper wrap and did all sorts of extra flashing because I knew that this could still be a rot area going forward. Hardy plank siding went back up, put on multiple coats of primer and paint, and other than some drywall refinishing and adding gutters, there was no real evidence that anything had ever happened. But all told, a $300 or $400 repair became a multiple thousands of dollars repair. This is why I say check your home. And watch my video about the 11 worst rot areas. Any one of them can result in very similar damages, and if you catch them early enough, they won't necessarily evolve into the full-blown catastrophe you've seen here. Also, get a termite inspection at least once or twice a year. And think about getting on a termite treatment plan. Wood rot is bad enough. Let those hungry little guys in your house, and things are going to go from bad to much worse. That's my story, just a quick one while we're still under quarantine here in North Carolina. Hope it didn't scare you too badly. But let me know what you thought of it. And carpenters, do you have a story like this? Have you seen something worse? Let me hear about it down in the comments. Like I said, it's water cooler talk. As always, thanks for watching. Be sure to check back in for more videos coming up soon. And please consider subscribing and hitting that little bell button beside the subscribe button to turn on notifications. That way you'll know the moment we post something. I'm Ethan James with the Honest Carpenter. I'll see you next time.